en un lugar de La Mancha, de cuyo nombre no quiero acordarme.
It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good
Aujourd'hui,
fortune
maman est morte. Ou peut-être hier, je ne sais pas.
Amanda DiCerno, president of Penguin Random House Audio, may not be able to see the future, but she sure can hear it. Welcome to the Spoken World podcast. I'm Christopher Kenneally. In a keynote address at Parix Audio Day in Madrid on February 13th, DiCerno addressed the worldwide state of the audio publishing industry in 2025. And in a follow-up interview with me on stage, she offered her forecast for the next generation of audiobook growth. Amanda DiCerno was named president of Penguin Random House Audio Global in August 2024. Since 2008, she has guided the PRH US audio business through a period of strong growth, expanding the audio catalog from 500 titles in 2008 and now publishing nearly 2,000 titles annually. Parix Audio Day brought 250 professionals and 40 speakers from 10 countries together in Madrid to consider the current state and the near future of audiobooks. In coming weeks, the Spoken World will feature recordings of presentations and discussions from the conference, as well as my interviews with some of the top names in the global audio publishing industry. Thanks for joining me, and please subscribe to the Spoken World podcast so you won't miss a single edition of the program.
I've been in audiobooks for 22 years at this point. And just to give you some background on my perspective at Penguin Random House Audio, where I serve as president globally, I oversee directly the U.S. audio publishing business and collaborate with my colleagues around the world. My mandate is really to expand our catalog, to grow our catalog, and to grow our overall audio business. The Random House Audio team is the most experienced audiobook production team in the world. In the US alone, we have over 20 full-time audiobook producers who together combined have over 300 years experience. Globally, we have 250 dedicated audio employees, and last year, PRH audio divisions worldwide recorded 35,000 hours of finished audiobooks. That's 4,700 audiobooks last year. We project to publish more than 5,000 audiobooks globally this year and 6,000 next year. And there's still more to be done. Penguin Random House operates in more than 20 territories worldwide, 32 in-house recording studios in New York, Los Angeles, Miami, Madrid, Mexico City, Buenos Aires, London, Toronto, and Sydney. I'm pleased to share that here in Spain, we'll be opening a studio in Barcelona very soon. We also record in studios outside of Penguin Random House. Our own studios are not nearly enough to produce all of the great content that we're publishing. We've invested in renovating in New York and Los Angeles office spaces to become state-of-the-art studio facilities. So we used to be offices with some studios built in. Now we're rethinking that, where we are state-of-the-art studios with some working space for offices, so totally flipping that. But before I get to where we are with audio growth today, I just want to do a quick exercise. We're all going to move around a little bit today. Humans have been not moving too much, don't worry. Humans have been telling stories aloud for millennia. We've always told stories. We've always listened to stories. This is very much a part of our human condition. But the history of audiobooks and commercial audiobooks, the way we think about audiobooks today, is a more recent one and very tied to technology. So I've already told you I've been in the business for 22 years. So who thinks that this commercial audio business started, just show of hands, in the early 2000s? Anyone? Early 2000s? Okay. 1990s? Who thinks we started audio in the 90s? Nobody. Interesting. 1980s? Is this, okay, did I see a hand for 80s? John gave me a hand for, I feel like an auctioneer. Is this a very shy crowd in the morning, or did no one believe that it's, okay, 70s? Does anybody give me the 70s? Got two 70s back there. Okay, a couple over here. 60s? Anybody? 1960s. I got one 19. I do feel like an auctioneer. Maybe I got another career after audiobooks. Okay, 1950s. Anybody think the 1950s? I got 3 for the 1950s. 2 already saw the presentation. Yes, it was the 1950s, and those 2 people are cheating. We will talk about that at lunch. So the first audiobooks publishers were founded in the 1950s. This is a story of technology. The story of our growth is a story of technology. Publishers transitioned to cassettes in the 1950s, and libraries were a very important resource as they are today. They began widely circulating audiobooks in the 1970s. In 1979, this was the first moment for audiobooks. Yes, the iPod was great, but many of us in the room will remember the Sony Walkman. You can tell what generation you're in if you remember it or not. That made audio portable for the first time. So that's when cassettes really took off. And that's when publishers got really smart and decided to keep their audio rights internally at publishing houses rather than license them to music companies, which they had been doing up to that point. The Audible player was introduced in 1997. And again, think about how revolutionary that was. Audible created their platform and their player before Apple had created the iPod. The Apple iPod came 4 years after that, and then in 2007, which I consider really the tipping point, was when the iPhone launched and meant that every listener could carry audiobooks around in their pocket all day, accessible at any moment. So the ubiquity and the easy access kicked off more than what we've seen of a decade of exponential growth in the audiobook business. In 2023, we reached a tipping point in the United States where more than half of Americans had listened to an audiobook. These decades of technological innovation built the foundation for the robust audiobook market we all work in today. As audiobooks are indeed big business, especially if you take a global view. As Chris mentioned, this is over a $7 billion business globally, and there is a lot of variation about how those dollars are distributed around the world. So I think of the global marketplace in mature markets, where over 30% of the population have listened to audiobooks, and emerging markets, where less than 30% have listened to audiobooks. In the mature markets, audio is mainstream, and many consumers are familiar with the format, and they have several apps on their phone for where they can download audio and listen at any moment. They even have favorite narrators. In the US, according to the Audio Publishers Association, the average audiobook consumer listens to 6 or 7 audiobooks a year. In the mature markets, audiobooks are these mature markets have in common an expansive catalog of both frontlist and backlist releases, as well as simultaneous release of audiobook and print editions. It's really key to get the marketing and publicity campaign all in one for both audio and print. And the more options for listeners out there, the better. On the side of emerging markets, France and Spain are on the upswing with around 20% of the population listening. Portuguese and Arabic-speaking countries are just beginning to grow their markets with less than 10% listening. In many of these territories, the catalog is more limited, and I'll come back to the crucial importance of growing the catalog in a few moments. But there's one message I want everyone in this room to take with them today, is that there is a very common but unfounded attitude, in fact, we were talking about it on the shuttle over today, that audiobooks will somehow cannibalize print sales. This is patently untrue. There's not truth to this at all. So when you go back to your offices, you can tell anyone there who says this. This is not true. In the US, audio has lived beside print for over 50 years now, and both formats are growing. So it is exactly the opposite. So take this back to your offices. Making books available in more formats makes it easier for consumers to read. The more they read, the more they buy, leading them to read even more books and discover more of your authors in print and audio. So, now that that's established, let's talk about future growth. Simply put, it's all about the catalog. The more high-quality titles available, high quality is important, the more listeners will come to the format. So speaking to all of the publishers in the room today, we should be working together to make as much great content available as possible at the highest quality. Audiobooks compete for the greatest resources, consumer dollars and consumer time. And we're competing against other forms of media like streaming TV and movies, video games, music, podcasts. So maintaining the highest quality standards and production value is important to winning those consumers over to this format. Historically, English and German language productions have dominated the global catalog, and there's still room for growth in both of those languages. At Penguin Random House, we're publishing as many titles as are recordable in the audio format. I'll speak to Spanish language publishing as a wonderful case study for the impact that catalog expansion can make. According to Nielsen, just 10 years ago, less than 3% of Spaniards had listened to audiobooks. But last year, that number had grown to nearly 20%. That's just in a decade. And during that same period, the audiobook catalog grew from a limited selection to more than 30,000 titles today. And look at us all here at the second annual Parix Audio Conference. The Grupo Editorial team in audio is celebrating their 10-year anniversary today, so congratulations to Carmen and the team for a very successful decade in audio publishing. And Spanish language audio sales are not just coming from here within Spain. According to Bookwire, slightly more than half of Spanish language audiobook sales come from the United States, with more than a quarter coming from Spain, and then of course more from Mexico and Latin America. Portuguese, French, Arabic are all languages that are ripe for exponential catalog expansion and audiobook adoption. Portuguese, spoken by 250 million people worldwide. But according to Dostosev's recent audiobook white paper, there are less than 8,000 titles in the Portuguese catalog. French, 350 million people worldwide, and the co-official language of 30 countries. Arabic is spoken by more than 400 million people in the Middle East, North Africa, and beyond. The sales opportunity for titles in every language is far from limited to the country of origin. Here's a look at the diversity of languages spoken in the United States. Nearly 70 million people speak a language other than English at home. Spanish is, of course, by far the most common, but there are more than 1 million speakers of Cantonese, Mandarin, Tagalog, Vietnamese, Arabic, French, and Korean. As you can see from this current snapshot, most Penguin Random House audio titles are published in English, German, and Spanish. Globally, we will be taking our own advice and expanding publishing into many more additional languages. One of the next frontiers for audio growth that I'm most personally excited about is the opportunity in children's audio. Children's audio has traditionally had a small market share compared to adult titles, and the growth annually is typically in the single digits. Many young parents, though, are now audiobook listeners themselves, and they clearly see the appeal of screen-free entertainment for their little ones. Today, the growing segment of children's speaker boxes and alternative physical formats give parents more options to share audio with their kids. Devices like Yoto, Tony's, the Dream Machine, StoryPod, Playaway, Wonderbook, and Wazoodle allow kids to listen independently without having to access a parent's Wi-Fi or their device. All these devices and platforms rely on a strong library of content for their users, and many are expanding into their Spanish language catalogs. They've been a great licensing partner for us at PRH, and our subrights revenue has grown nearly 100% in the last year because of these devices. As a complement to expanding the catalog, there's still more opportunity to grow the audiobook listener base. Despite the exponential growth the industry has seen over the past decade, we still have work to do, bringing more listeners to the format. Speaking to all of my competitors in the room, there is plenty of opportunity for all of us. In fact, we likely need to collaborate to ensure the growth. In the early years of the US audio boom, US audio publishers came together and created the Audio Publishers Association, which has worked to advocate for the format, providing valuable consumer and sales data to members. So support your local trade organizations, and if you don't have one, make one. Audiobook listeners are skewing younger, and these listeners are digital natives. And so much of what's working now for us is video content and visual content. So our team works to capture as much behind-the-scenes content from recording sessions as we can. This looks great. Videos from studios are our highest performing posts on social media, and we were thrilled to shoot footage with Sutton Foster narrating Astrid Lindgren's classic Pippi Longstocking, and Alexander Skarsgård narrating Hernan Diaz's In the Distance. These are from our studios in New York recently. As any discussion about the future of the audiobook industry would be incomplete without discussing AI, let's have a moment there. Most audiobooks that are produced and consumed today are still traditionally recorded. But we can expect that the number of AI-generated audiobooks to grow very quickly. At PRH, we are excited to experiment with AI technologies, but feel it's important to do so under some guiding principles. We will carefully consider 3 factors in potentially implementing the use of AI in audiobook production, and artificial voice particularly. First, we will do this with the full support from the author and the creatives working on the project. We will have careful review and oversight of our AI output by human directors, human producers, and human engineers. And most importantly, and John will speak on this in a moment, is full transparency to the listeners about the use of artificial voice. One guiding principle we all use at Penguin Random House is with AI technology is it starts with a human and it ends with a human. So what's next? The outlook for audio on a global scale is hugely positive, but of course not without its challenges. First, if growing the catalog is the most pressing goal, navigating a very fragmented global rights landscape is one of the toughest challenges. Many older contracts were not inclusive of audio, and confirming audio rights, particularly in additional languages, can be difficult and requires significant editorial resources. Next, ask yourself if you're positioned for more rapid growth. Is your team resourced to double or triple your business in the next 2 to 5 years? Plan for it. Speak directly to everyone who's responsible for audio at your company and encourage them to grow the business, and you must fight for that investment. It will reward you many times over. I'll close by saying that the audiobook story is overwhelmingly one of opportunity, and the market is far from saturated. In the US alone, I mentioned half of Americans had listened to an audiobook. That means half have never listened to an audio. And that never listened number is quite bigger in many other markets. So good luck.
Well, thank you indeed, Amanda DiCerno, and we'll take a few moments to chat, and we'll also have some questions from the audience.
Great.
And I wanted to ask you about the new role that you have at Penguin Random House, which is Global Director of Audiobooks. And that first word seems to be really important and is an indication of the approach that Penguin Random House is taking to audiobooks. And yet there's, as you mentioned, many local concerns. So talk about the challenge, the juggling act between the global view that you have and the need to serve local audiences, individual communities.
So we're always, as a global publisher, we always publish locally. So our editors are buying books locally that make sense for their market. My job is to get them not only to publish the book, but to publish the audiobook with it. And in emerging markets, it can be difficult because right now we're in investment phase. So it's a cost right now to do that. However, we know what's coming. The US and Germany had the benefit of generations of growing this business before it got to digital. Now that digital is here, this exponential growth is going to take place very, very quickly in emerging markets. So I'm here to cheerlead and get everybody to go forward with their audiobook production.
Right, and you've indicated, you talked about the role that studios have.
Yes.
And in fact, you described, and I thought it was very interesting that you're sort of flipping it. It's studio first.
Yes.
For you right now. Talk about why that's so important.
I really think what's happening right now, in addition to the audio content, is the video piece of this and the visual piece of this, especially with young listeners. And so many listeners are young. They're under age 34, as you mentioned earlier. And they're used to multimedia. They're used to multi-sensory content. So capturing photos from the studio, videos from the studio, conversations with authors, conversations with actors, all of that is so important in how we promote and market our books. So owning our own studios, not only it saves a lot of money to own our own studios, but it also gives us the freedom to go in and really explore those opportunities. We have big spaces that can accommodate a full cast. But even with 32 studios worldwide, with more being built regularly, that's why I paused at that number, it's not enough. I mean, we're constantly using freelance studios around the world.
But quality is a piece of that,
yes.
Right? It's really important. And as we face this exponential growth that you're talking about, it will happen in tandem with producing quality audiobooks.
Absolutely.
There really can't be any falling back on that.
No. Quality, I was having this conversation last night. Audiobooks are new for so many people, and they have to be good. If you come into the audiobook universe as a first-time listener, and you don't like the book that you've listened to, you don't say, it's not that book, I'll try something else. You immediately, the consumer closes the door and says, that's it, audiobooks are not for me. No consumer ever says that with print books. They don't pick up a print book that they don't like and say, reading is not for me. They don't go to the theater and see a movie they don't like and say, no more movies in my life, ever. But with audiobooks, we have one opportunity to grab them. And if that audiobook is great, we all know that power of a great story, they will come back. They will keep listening. If that experience is not great, sadly, we've lost that consumer forever.
Right. And in your presentation, too, you mentioned the importance of catalog. And there's two ways to go with catalog. Yeah. You can go wide, or you can really focus and go narrow. Is that a yes and or an either or? What's the approach? I know
nobody's going to like this answer, but it's all of the above. You've got to do everything. Your backlist will surprise you every once, and even though you think you know the backlist and you do know the backlist, something will always surprise you. With the launch of Spotify about a year and a half ago now, in the US, we knew what our top selling books were. We knew what our favorites were. We knew the backlist that performed well. We were so surprised to see Anthony Bourdain, Kitchen Confidential, as one of our top 5 audiobooks on that platform. Top 5. This is a book that was published before I was even in audio. That's how old this book is. I worked on Anthony's book tour when he was first promoting it in Manhattan, and I was shocked that. So with new platforms and new audiences, you reach new consumers, and if we hadn't had that book on the list, of course, something else would take its place. but it's a great, refreshing surprise how your backlist can surprise you.
Right. Amanda DiCiano, President of Penguin Random House Global Audiobooks. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
That's all for now. Our producer is Jeremy Brisky of Burst Marketing, and Rob Simon is our executive producer. The Spoken World covers the latest news in the global audiobook market and features exclusive interviews with audio industry leaders, analysts, and innovators. Learn more at spokenworld.media and subscribe on all major podcast and streaming platforms. I'm Christopher Kenneally. Join me again soon on The Spoken World.